So good morning. Those that just came in, good morning. Nakaya, Nazir, good morning. Today is February 11th, 2021. This is U.S. History. I'm your instructor, Mr. Townsend. So we have a couple of things that we have to go over. Most of it will be on Summit for you guys to complete. We have to study, this topic is not going to be a fun topic per se. It is kind of dry, but it is what it is. So we have to make do with what we have. So just some starting questions just to see where we're at knowledge-wise. I have a question for you. I'm putting something in the chat. I want to see if you, I'm asking, opening question is, what document dictates life in the United States? What document? A document is simply a piece of paper. So what document dictates life in the United States? You can feel to answer audibly, or you can put it in the chat. Basically, what document creates the rules and provides you with your rights as citizens? Amir, you're talking about the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence is definitely one of the documents that started the process for our current document. Without the Declaration of Independence, we wouldn't have that document that we have now. So what document? It's actually over my left shoulder. What document creates the rules in the society and provides you with your rights as citizens? What's the name of the document? Come on, wake up, folks. I know this is not the best, the easiest topic in the morning. What document provides your rights as citizens? You are all American citizens, are we not? The Bill of Rights, excellent. Thank you, Nakaya. And the Bill of Rights is inclusive in what document? The Bill of Rights is our first 10 amendments to what document? It starts with, you from Iraq? You ain't from Iraq. Trust me, you don't want to be from Iraq. No fun. So those Bill of Rights, our right to speech, our right to press, our right to bear arms, our right to no quartering, our right to illegal search and seizures. What document is the Bill of Rights founded in? It starts with we the people. Sammy, what do you think the name of the document is that dictates your rights in the United States? So you guys are walking around as young adults and we don't know what document provides our rights, what document that we look to as a guide for our rights and privileges in the United States. We don't know that. Because you're going to make me shut down this whole history course if we don't know that. What document, come on folks, what document provides our rights as citizens? Someone said, Nakaya said the Bill of Rights. That's okay. If you don't remember, then we'll, I'll simply put it in the chat here. The United States Constitution, okay? The United States Constitution is our document that provides us with our rights as citizens. It has done everything from free the slaves. It has provided equal protection under the law, term limitations, to women's suffrage, to prohibition of alcohol. We've had different ups and downs with the Constitution over the years. Does anyone know what year the Constitution was ratified and signed? No? What about you, Miss Cat? You know? We'll see if it's not to put the students on the spot as much.
The year that it was signed?
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't know that.
Okay. Does any other student, do we have any idea of what year the Constitution came into effect in this country? There's a year that's kind of synonymous with our independence.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's gonna be like not that long after 1776.
Good. So Nakaya said 1776. Nakaya, you're correct on that. Our Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776. That's what we declared. It's actually 1789 is when the Constitution came into effect. So now that we talked about the Constitution, our topic today is why did the framers need to make the Constitution? So there was a document. This document is actually right there. It's on the right-hand side next to Dr. King on my wall here. Does anyone know the name of the first document that was used as the rules and regulations for the United States government? What was our first binding agreement or our first binding document called? This one's kind of a tough one. The Articles of Confederation. Has anyone ever heard of the Articles of Confederation before? This was our first document that was created in the United States. Well, technically our second, but this is our first constitution. That's an easy way to put it. The Articles of Confederation is our first constitution of the United States. Now, there were some problems and some weaknesses with the Confederation, the Articles of Confederation. So I'm going to put up I have a 4-minute video. I'm going to queue up real quick for you. And while you're watching it, I want you to list maybe one of, I think I'm going to give us like 5 or 6. I want you to give me one of the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. Okay? So just give me a moment. Let me pull that up for you. All right, so the first one I'm going to play for you is a video just that basically explains what were the Articles of Confederation. So we'll do a definition first. What were they, since we don't seem to know what they are? It's about 2 minutes and 29 seconds, okay? This is going to tell you what the Articles of Confederation were.
File with the help of an expert, or let an expert file for you. Intuit TurboTax Live.
In the U.S., we love our Constitution. But it wasn't always this way. Before the Constitution and government we have today, we had a sort of prototype constitution called the Articles of Confederation, which created a nation of independent states only loosely linked together by a single Congress. The Founding Fathers intentionally designed a nation with a very weak central government. There was no judicial branch, no executive branch, so there was no president, which when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. You know, the colonists had just been through a really bad breakup with the British king, and they're not about to get back together with a government who looked just like their ex, okay? We've all made that mistake before, okay? You go and date a girl like the last girl you dated, you're gonna get hurt, okay? Don't do this to yourself. The Congress, which was just a single chamber with a delegate from every state, did have some power, like the authority to make treaties and alliances, maintain an army, and coin money. but they couldn't levy the taxes to pay for those things. In fact, under the Articles of Confederation, paying federal taxes was voluntary for the states, who of course were like, no thanks, we're good. The US had borrowed money from European investors and nations to pay for the Revolutionary War, but with no power to tax, the United States couldn't pay back any of those debts, creating a huge economic disaster by 1787. With no funds and limited power, the central government couldn't do much to protect peace at home. This became abundantly clear during Shays' Rebellion in 1786, when farmers in Massachusetts violently protested against the state's high taxes. So if the Articles of Confederation weren't working, why didn't they just make changes to it? Well, it was practically impossible. Amendments to the Articles needed unanimous consent, and the delegates from the 13 states had more opinions than a YouTube comment section. By the way, you should comment on this video right now. Say something nice about it. This weak Congress and a broke, ineffective federal government eventually proved to be too much of a burden on the United States. Because when 13 different state governments held all the power, nothing was getting accomplished. The Founding Fathers found this out the hard way. So they went back to the drawing board, drafting a new and improved Constitution, which is still the law of our land today.
Okay, so just that short video, it tells you about the Articles of Confederation, which was a confederation is simply a loosely connected group of cities or states. In the Civil War, the South was called the Confederacy. So a confederation is a loosely connected group of states. So this document, because the American colonies was created from a monarchy, you have to remember that the United States was a colony of Britain. Because they were a colony of Britain, they were under the rule of King George III, who was a monarch. So when they created the United States, they were afraid that a strong central government would become a dictatorship or a monarchy again. Now, I don't know how well we are with current events. I was talking about January 6th of this year, actually. Were there fears of people taking over the government? Were they warranted? Were they worthwhile fears? Even today in 2021. What happened in our country about a month ago? What happened about a month ago in our country? In the Capitol, in Washington, D.C.? Does anyone know? There was some type of riot or insurrection that took place. Amir, do you watch the news? Nazir, do you watch the news? Sammy, what took place in this country about a month ago? No, you don't watch the news? Okay.
I don't watch it either.
Okay.
But I did see it, that little riot thing for Trump.
Okay, yeah, you did. Okay, thank you, Nazir. Excellent. The riot for Trump was actually what we call a civil insurrection. It's okay, Sammy, no problem. A civil insurrection was that they literally tried to overturn the election of the United States. And this was to attempt to keep Donald Trump in power. Now, even though this was back in 1789, the founders knew that people who could be demagogues, people who could be charismatic leaders were dangerous to a democracy because you could easily turn a democracy into a dictatorship or into a monarchy. And I think that there was a definite coup that took place, but it's not my place right now. If you turn on any of the major news networks, the Congress, actually it's the Senate, is in the process of impeaching. Well, the House already impeached him, but the Senate is now impeaching Donald Trump for a second time, which is unprecedented. No president has been impeached twice, but Donald Trump will be the first president to be removed from office twice. And for these fears that they had under the Articles of Confederation, there was no president, there was no executive branch, there was no judicial branch. And if we know anything about our three branches of government, from fifth grade, maybe sixth grade, seventh grade, what is the function of the executive office? I know I'm taking it back a little bit here, but what is the function of the executive office? What is the function of the president? Or does the president really have a function, or is he just a figurehead? Do you think the president has any real power? Oh, I lost Kalia. Yes, absolutely. There is always going to be someone higher than him because of our, not necessarily higher, but we have a system called checks and balances in this country. So the job of the executive is to execute the law. The job of the judicial is to interpret the law. And the job of the legislative is to create the laws, is to pass the laws, is to make legislation. That's why it's called the legislative branch. So by not having an executive branch, we didn't have any type of president at the time. We also had problems where the Congress could not tax anybody. They could declare war, but they could not tax anybody. There was no court system. So debates about taxes, debates about currency, there was no one to go to. There was no higher court in America. So this, oh, sorry, I just got a message here. So this, these faults inside the Articles of Confederation, and there's a list of them. So I'm gonna show you a second video on the faults of the Articles of Confederation and why it was necessary for the founders to create a new document. Your first checkpoint.
Excuse me.
Yes, I should.
Every time what? Don't you send out a new link every day, right?
I send out an invite every day, but it's the same exact link, Shanice.
Okay, so I was just confused about that, but now that I got the link, I'll just start using this one.
Yep, that's the link. Welcome to class. We're discussing the Articles of Confederation, which is a little dry, but it is what it is. Okay, so this document that was written had some problems. It had some issues. So we're going to look at some of the issues of the Articles of Confederation. So while it's playing, if you have a pencil or a paper or somewhere you can take a note, I would like for you to list one of the issues with the Articles of Confederation. And we're going to put that into our chat box. I'll put a white screen up and we'll put up some of the deficiencies of the Articles of Confederation. So for those that weren't here or just came in, basically the Articles of Confederation was the precursor to the United States Constitution. It was the first document that regulated government in this country. There was no executive branch. There was no judicial branch. It was mostly a legislative branch. To get things done, it was almost impossible because we needed 13 out of 13 to ratify something, which was almost impossible. It's hard to get 3 people to agree on something, never less 13. So all these states had their own ideas. They had their own, most states had their own money. They had their own currency. They had their own courts. So interstate commerce, interstate trade was very hard to regulate at the time. So let's look at this video, and I want you to put, I'll put in the chat, please give me one of the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. 1 second. Okay.
The Articles of Confederation, America's first founding document, which went into effect in the 1780s, had no power to tax, could not enforce laws, and could not maintain a standing army. Under the Articles, all powers rested with the states, so the national government had no authority to accomplish anything. During the Revolution, men were off fighting for the new nation. Many of them had to take out loans to keep their farms going in their absence. After the war, the creditors wanted their money. Sometimes the states backed the debtors and ordered the creditors to forgive the debts. But sometimes they backed the creditors and the people's farms, their homes, were foreclosed. Many men were put into debtor prison until family members could come up with the money to get them out. The new nation was in a horrible crisis with inflation. The war had been financed by loans from Spain and France. The money had to be repaid, but because of the revolution, a lot of business was lost from the former colonies. Trade with the British West Indies was gone. The new government asked the states for more money, but they said no. The answer was, print more money. But of course that never works. It made the money less and less valuable. So now the people had fistfuls of worthless money. So now you have all of these farmers who had fought in the revolution, unable to keep their farms. Now they cannot feed their family, and they have no property, which at the time meant in most states they could not vote. As this was happening, people turned to the leaders they had in the war. One of these leaders was Daniel Shays of Massachusetts. Daniel Shays and the other farmers pick up their guns and go to the state courthouse to stop them from foreclosing on their homes. And it worked. You see, with no standing American military, it was the job of the state militia to put down this rebellion. Shays and the farmers were the state militia. Under the Articles of Confederation, the new government couldn't raise revenue, couldn't enforce laws to help the people, and did not have the power to forcibly put down a rebellion. In this instance, Shays' rebellion showed that for the American experiment to work, there had to be a stronger central government. Shays himself eventually received a pension for his 5 years of unpaid military service. Still, he actually ended his life in poverty as a heavy drinker. But due to his actions in Shays' rebellion and other similar movements, the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation were seen, and a convention was called to create the U.S. Constitution.
Okay. So, what were... So according to the video, what were some of the weaknesses of the Articles? What were some of the problems with the Articles of Confederation? What was going on with, so they talked about a guy named Daniel Shay, and I'll give you a little bit of background on him since we may not know. Daniel Shay was a well-known, he was pretty much well-known during the Revolution. He was also a farmer. So the farmers they went off to war, and they had to take these loans to hold their land, to control their land while they were gone. When they came back from the war, they couldn't pay back their debts. So some of them was placed in debtors prison. Some of them had their farms taken from them. Well, they picked up arms and they fought back. And because the states had no power to have a national military, they could not quell these rebellions. So there was problem with inflation. There was problem with money. I actually have a list here. There was no national debt. I'll put these up on Summit for you. They could not raise an army. There was no soldiers. The Articles did not give the Congress the power to raise an army. So the Congress, in essential, was broke. The Congress didn't have money like it does today. There was no interstate trade. I'll explain this to you. So during that time, I have some here in front of me. There were different denominations of money. So when you went to one state, this was Nebraska, okay? So this was the Bank of Nebraska, and this would have been a $1 bill for Nebraska. The problem is that this dollar was no good in New York. So this would be a New York dollar under the Articles of Confederation. This was a completely different, no one would use this in Nebraska. Same thing would be, what state is this here? This is Illinois. So every state that you would go into had a different type of bank. It had a different central bank. And you could not use the money to go from state to state. This was Maine's money. And as you can see, all of the money was absolutely and utterly different. And this one is actually from Pennsylvania, where we live here. So each of these denominations, they couldn't be used. So if you were a farmer in New York and you used this denomination and you brought a stack of these ones down to Pennsylvania, you could not use them in Pennsylvania. They were invalid. That's why we have the what we call greenbacks today. That's why we have the universal dollar for the United States. That comes from the Articles of Confederation. So the Article of Confederation was unicameral, which means it only had one house. It only had one house. Today we are bicameral. We have a House of Representatives and we have a Senate. They had no common currency. There was, like I just showed you, there was no universal money. So states acted as individual entities. Basically, states were their own little countries. And there was no national court system. And there was no way to settle states' quarrels. So let's say if a state started to build on one part of land, and another state said, well, that's our forest, that's in our land. There was no way to regulate between the two. So why did so your first checkpoint is going to be, why did the framers need to make a new constitution? And I put a presentation together for you to help you have a better understanding because it is a little bit of a heavy, it is a heavy topic. It's not an easy topic. So when you go into Summit, you're going to find 3 different letters written. Let me show you those real quick. There's going to be 3 different letters. What I did was, so what we've been talking about is all the reasons why the framers believed that a new constitution was necessary. By highlighting all the shortcomings of the Articles of Confederation, there was a need for a new national document. And your first checkpoint is to read these 3 letters. There's one from Hamilton, one from George Washington, and one from John Jay. Now, I know that some of this wording is from the 1700s, which may be a little bit difficult for you to understand. But what I did was I put this PowerPoint together to try to summarize it a little bit more for you. So this will be up on Summit too. Let's look at some of the main points in here. So why did the framers of the Constitution believe a new document was necessary? So the Articles of Confederation, the document we've been talking about, and perpetual union was the first written Constitution of the United States. It was written in 1777 and was stemming from wartime urgency. Its progress was slowed by fears of central authority and extensive land claims by states. So that fear of a central authority is basically a fear of a monarchy or a fear of a dictatorship growing out of the United States as a new nation. Because remember, it was a very new nation. And then these extensive land grabs by states, what I was just talking about. If a state says, well, this land is ours, this land is yours, we founded it, there was no way to litigate who was in control of certain areas. So the Articles of Confederation had all these weaknesses, it had all these problems. And remember, 1776 was our Declaration of Independence. And most people don't realize that in between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, there was another document that was controlling life in the United States. So you're going to examine 3 different documents written by the Founding Fathers expressing their concerns about the Articles of Confederation and the need for a new governing document. So it says, please take notes with the emphasis of recording at least one concern each Founding Father expressed within the documents. So at the end of this, there's an assessment there that can help you with your checkpoint. So let's review some of the documents and some of the concerns that these three gentlemen had, three of the founding fathers. So Hamilton, and there's a lot here. So let's look at Hamilton first. Do we all know who Hamilton was? I know that there's like a really popular play with Hamilton right now. But Hamilton was one of our founding fathers. And he was quintessential in the formation of the Constitution and our ideas of liberty today. So this would be Hamilton. Do I have any student that's actually brave enough to read this? I know that's a big social risk, but do I have any, apologies. Do I have any students that are brave enough to attempt to read this for me? I'll give you a cookie. No one's that brave? No? Okay, I guess I'll be reading it myself. I'm sorry. Come on. Sometimes this Zoom doesn't do what I want to do. Okay, so I will read this to you. And I want you to try to answer this question. According to Hamilton, what problems arose from the Articles of Confederation? So this is a letter from Alexander Hamilton to James Duane, a prominent New York lawyer and a future constitutional delegate. Hamilton describes the imbalance of power between state and federal governments. So I'm going to read this quick to you. And I want you to try to tell me what problems arose from the Articles of Confederation. So this is from Hamilton. The fundamental defect is a want of power in Congress. It is hardly worthwhile to show in what this consists, as it seems to be universally acknowledged, or to the point of how it has happened, as the only person is how to remedy it. It may, however, be said that it has originated from three causes: an excess of the spirit of liberty, which has made the particular states show a jealousy of all power not in their hands. And this jealousy has led them to exercise a right of judging in the last resort of the measures recommended by Congress, and of acting according to their own opinions and the propriety or necessity, a diffidence in Congress of their own powers, by which they have been timid and indecisive in their resolutions, constantly making concessions to the states, till they have scarcely left themselves a shadow of power. This is referring to the Congress. A want of sufficient means at their disposal to answer the public's exigencies, and the vigor to draw forth those means, which have occasioned them to depend on the states individually to fulfill their engagement with the army, and the consequences of which has been to ruin their influence and credit with the army, to establish its dependence on each state separately rather than on them, that is, rather than as a whole collectively. But the Confederation itself is defective and requires to be altered. It is neither fit for war nor peace. The idea of an uncontrollable sovereignty in each state over its internal police will defeat the other powers given to Congress and make our unions feeble and precarious. There are instances without number where acts necessary for the general good and which rise out of the powers given to Congress must interfere with the internal police of the states. And there are as many instances with the particular states by arrangements of internal police can be effectually through indirect counteract the arguments of Congress. You have already had examples of this for which I refer to your own memory. The Confederation too gives the power of the purse too entirely to state legislatures. It should provide perpetual funds in the disposal of Congress by a land tax, poll tax, or the like. All imposts upon commerce ought to be laid out by Congress and appropriated to their use. And for without certain revenues, a government can have no power. That power which holds the purse strings absolutely must rule. There seems to be a medium which, without making Congress altogether independent, will tend to give reality to its authority. Another defect in our system is a want or method and energy in the administration. This has partly resulted from the other defect, but in a great degree from the prejudice and the want of a proper executive, no president, okay, no president. Congress has kept the power too much in their own hands and have meddled too much with details of every sort. Congress is properly a deliberative course and forgets itself when it attempts to play the executive. It is impossible such a body, numerous as it is, constantly fluctuating, can ever act with sufficient decision or with system. Okay, now I know that that's wordy. I know that some of those words, are not what we use in our general vernacular. So this is why I created the shortcut guide for you guys. So according to Hamilton, there were some definite problems with the articles. And the first one he said was that the fundamental defect is a want of power in Congress. That Congress, being a unicameral single body, just had too much power. In the excess of the spirit of liberty, which has made particular states show jealousy of all power not in their hands. So the states wanted more control. Because there was no strong central government, the states wanted control of as much as they could get. Congress, being indecisive and timid in their resolutions, making concessions to the states, too may have scarcely made themselves a shadow of power. So by conceding to the states, the Congress has lost their power underneath the articles. They weren't strong enough. This goes to the ability not to tax, the inability not to tax, the ability not to be able to raise a national army. So you had all these issues with the states. The want of submission means at their disposal to answer the political exigencies of vigor and draw forth those needs. So just again, with Shays' Rebellion, they didn't have an army to put down the rebellions. They didn't have any national courts to litigate between the states. States are individually required to fulfill their own engagements with the army. So they didn't have any national army to look to or to have. Uncontrollables, what I say? That must be wrong. I must have made a typo there. The power of the purse. They didn't have money. If you know anything about Congress today, Congress is the one that gives us appropriations for war. And Congress was also the one that provided taxation for these wars. So that was the Hamilton's problem with the Articles of Confederation. Well, you say, Mr. Townsend, how does that relate to my checkpoint? What does all that have to do with my checkpoint? Well, let's go back to your checkpoint. So in your checkpoint, you're going to be asked verbatim the same question that is inside of the notes that I made for you. Why did the framers of the Constitution believe a new document was necessary? So you're going to read through those 3 articles. And down here in your supporting question, you're going to answer that question. Why did the framers of the Constitution believe a new document was necessary? Now you have 3 different articles that you're going to read that are related to this. They are in your resources section of Summit. So you have one here that we just read from Hamilton. And according to Hamilton, I bullet pointed all the problems with the Articles of Confederation. The next document is from George Washington. And then the third one is from John Jay. So you're going to read each of these documents. You're going to reference my guide that I gave you. And as you go through the guide, you'll see that you're welcome. I put this together for you because I know that some of these concepts are a little bit difficult. And, this is, like I said, sometimes when we get to certain areas of U.S. history, it gets a little dry. But there's not much that we can do but kind of soldier on through the dry parts. It won't all be like this, but some of it is, okay? So Hamilton, this is our second part. When you read the letter, this is just a summary of what Hamilton wanted. You might want to take a screenshot of this or take notes of this because this is a even reduced summary of what I put before. So Hamilton said that Congress wanted too much power. They wanted too much power. The states were trying to land grab, they were trying to power grab, they were trying to get as much influence as they could. The Articles of Confederation, they reduced the powers of the purse entirely to the state legislators, no taxation. And by Congress making too many concessions to the states, reduced their own power, and then states had to fulfill their own engagements with the army. So that's what Hamilton took away as the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. So what about Washington? What did Washington say? And I'm going to allow you guys to do this on your own because I don't want to go too in depth for you. But when you read the article, you have this document here to kind of supplement. So even if you don't really understand what the article is saying, this summary here should help you. So Washington, he believed that jealousy and local policy mixed too much in public councils for the good of the government. That rulers did not have sufficient power to order and direct the affairs of the Union. Basically, the wheels of government were clogged. Washington questions the advantage of foreign commerce, but believes that trade between the states should not be restricted. So that interstate trade was one of the problems in the Articles of Confederation, that you really couldn't do much interstate trade. And then the third one would be John Jay. And once again, this is all summarized for you. And then you are going to put your answers right here inside of this at the end of this slideshow. So your assignment's going to be this one here on Summit. And you're literally going to have, with these three source documents, I'm going to provide with you a summarized version and a PowerPoint of all these documents and some of the overlying themes. You're going to answer that in Summit down here at the bottom. And I want you to use direct quotes from each letter. So if you say that Hamilton believed that there was too much power in the states, I want you to take that from the document and put that into your supporting question. Okay. So we got about 9 minutes left. So real quick, what did we learn about the Articles of Confederation? What were some of the problems with the Articles of Confederation? There was quite a bit. What were some of the problems with the Articles of Confederation? I just told you about them for like the last 40 minutes or so. Come on, students. You didn't pick up anything about the Articles of Confederation today. Nothing. We just slept through class. I think I lost a couple people too, Miss Cat. This is just not a fun, not a fun topic.
It's important though.
No. Okay, somebody gave me something here. All right, let's see what we got. Good, thank you, Sammy. Taxation. So no national court system was our first problem. There was no national court system, no taxation, no way to taxate, no executive branch. So there was no president. They were not able to raise an army. on that and that too, or at that fact, a Navy either. No Army, no Navy. No interstate trade. No national currency. Good. They had to borrow money. Excellent. And they borrowed money because of fighting in the revolution. It was hard to amend. It was not amendable. You had to have 13 out of 13 states to agree. Does anyone know what the agreement rate is under the Constitution that they have to pass a law? How much of Congress do you have to vote to pass a law? What percentage? Take a guess. Like it's actually a percent out of 100. What percent out of 100 do you need to pass a law? It's actually more of a fraction that translates into a number. Does anyone know how much of Congress it takes to pass a law? Take a guess. Take a guess.
60%.
Close. Very close. Go up a little higher.
80.
Okay. Lower. Stay in the 60s.
Oh, what? 65.
Very close. One more. 70. Very close. We call it the devil's number.
66.
66.
Oh, they just said it.
66.6. Which is basically a 2/3 majority. It's a 2/3 majority. Same thing for any procedural when it comes to the Constitution is always 2/3. It takes 2/3 majority to pass any type of law. It takes 2/3 majority to pretty much do anything in the United States. Why do you think that they wanted a 2/3 majority to pass a law? Why do you think you need such a high number as 66%? Do all people agree on which laws are best for each other?
No.
Not really, right? So the reason that you needed such a high amount was because we wanted to make sure that what we were passing as a democracy was right for the people and not just right for certain people. I'm not talking about not right for certain individuals, but as the population as a whole. Now, under the Articles of Confederation, it was almost impossible to pass a law, to amend anything, because it was 13 out of 13. It's hard to get, I want to say there's like maybe about 8 people in the room right now. It's hard to get 8 people in here to agree about anything. Agreed? Is there anything that you think that all of us can agree on in this room? Like, here's an example. My favorite food is fried chicken. Any day of the week. Fried chicken with some sriracha sauce, I'm ready. Does anybody else have a different favorite food?
Alfredo.
Alfredo, okay. So Nazir's off the list of my. Miss Cat, you have a favorite food?
Yeah, I really like any sort of pasta, so I guess that's similar to Nazir's.
Okay, so we have 2 pasta people. Anyone else have? Okay, Deja, pizza. Okay. So we have pizza, we have pasta. Anybody else? Hot wings. Okay. I could do the hot wings, definitely. So if we were trying to make, let's say we were trying to make a national food for the United States. And we we're going to say this was going to be our national food. We're going to eat it all the time. We're going to celebrate this food. And it's going to become law that this food is our national food. Just in this room, it's difficult to try to come up with a consensus, right? I can't get to 2/3. Miss Cat and Nazir want pasta. Deja wants pizza and wings. I could deal with Popeyes or KFC being a national food, you know. I'm sure that we have other people that have different palates, right? I'm a rice and beans guy. I like rice and beans. I like Chinese food. I like some Indian food. But there's all, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and greens. That sounds good. So see all these differences in who we are as people as far as just something as simple as food. Now I try to take that and to put it into the way that we should live. What rules apply to what people? And another question that you can put out there is, are the rules really worthwhile if not all people have to follow them? That's another problem with the Articles of Confederation. The states were they were power hungry. Which led to things like Shays' Rebellion. So even us as individuals, when it comes down to something as simple as food, we're not going to be able to make a consensus. It's hard. It's hard to agree. All of us agree that on one food. And it's going to be it's going to be difficult for all of us to agree on how to live. What one person may see as trivial or unimportant, another person might see as the end all to be all. So these were some of the problems that arise from the Articles. There was no national court system. If you have a cell phone, I would highly suggest you take a picture of this screenshot here, or screenshot of this picture on the screen now. These 10 reasons. So if you have your cell phone, which I know most of you do because you're attached to it by the hip, take your cell phone and take a picture of this screen here for me, please. Because we're going to come back to this at some point. So no national court, no taxation, no executive branch, not able to raise an army or a navy, no interstate trade, no national currency. Congress had to borrow money. It was hard to amend, 13 out of 13 to agree. No treaties, and states were power hungry. Those are your 10 take away problems with the Articles of Confederation. You're going to review those 3 articles from 3 founders who basically outline their concerns with the Articles of Confederation. The PowerPoint will be on Summit, where I gave you really good summaries of each of the documents, and you can use those to respond to your checkpoint. So please take a screenshot of the problems with the Articles of Confederation. And before you go, we have 3 minutes. I want each student to tell me at least one problem with the Articles of Confederation. As you tell me that, you may be dismissed. So in the chat or out loud, I want you to tell me one of the problems with the articles, and you may go.
No text.
Thank you, Shanice. You may go. Next.
No national court system.
No national court system. Thank you, Mark. You may go. Next.
No treaties.
No treaties. Excellent. Thank you, sir. You may go, Nazir. Anyone else? Nikaya?
I didn't hear your question. What you had said?
I said I want you to tell me one of the problems with the Articles of Confederation.
Oh, see, I just came.
That's okay. Look on the screen, sweetie.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Tell me one of the ones on the screen, Deja. No executive branch. Thank you, Nakaya. Thank you, Amir. You may go. Deja, can you tell me one of the weaknesses?
Yeah, I was looking. No national court system.
Thank you, Deja. Have a good day.
You're welcome. You too.
Bev, you still with us? Sammy, can you put in the chat one of the weaknesses of the articles, please? Thank you, Sammy. Have a good day. Naima, Bev, you guys still with us? I'm gonna assume they're either knocked out or they are off the call. So, all right, Ms. Cat, you gotta give me one of the problems with the Articles of Confederation.
Oh, no treaties.
No treaties. Thank you, Ms. Cat.
You're welcome. Thank you. Have a great day.
Yep. All right. I'll see you guys later.
See ya.